Welcome, everyone. John Valutkevich from the Drummond Group here. Presenting with my colleague, Bob Bryan. So just as a point for introductions, I've been fortunate to be with Drummond since 2019, and I have responsibility for a number of programs that relate to fire certification and testing, including one to the topic of today's session, predictive decision support interventions. 20 years in the EHR product development industry, some time in storage, and some additional time consulting. So happy to be here to support Bob as we walk our clients and prospects through this education session. Bob, I'll turn it over to you for a brief introduction as well.
Yeah, hi, I'm Bob Bryan. I am the Director of Drummond Advisory Services. Looking forward to talking about the topic of trust in AI today. We've spent the better part of the last year and a half working with customers to comply with the ONC's B11 criterion, which covers predictive decision support. That's the new aspect of it that came in. Predictive decision support is really the AI component of decision support. And with the growth of AI in healthcare in general, we've been digging in particularly to how compliance fits in with overall trust for AI products. So that's what we'll be talking about today.
Great. So again, just to tee up what Bob and I will be going through, what we do want to do is level set and just give our attendants an idea of what it means by AI explainability. You might have seen this in literature. We certainly, and we'll talk more about this near the conclusion of the presentation, heard a lot about it at the spring trade shows, and how that is part and parcel of the industry and the way in which they're drawing on initiatives and regulations that are leveraging explainability as it relates to AI products that support predictive decision support. So we'll bring in some observations from the field as well. And we're going to tie that all in to say that as you look at the advice and the guidance and some of the laws and regulations that relate to artificial intelligence as it relates to healthcare IT, what Drummond is doing in that space as we have a new predictive decision support intervention risk certification program. So we'll touch on these four areas throughout the course of this presentation. And right now we'll transition over, Bob, and I'll have you set this table and provide some information and some reference points for what it means for AI explainability.
Sounds good. Explainability is a topic that certainly as we went through the sort of cycle of conferences at the start of this year, it's getting growing exposure in all of the discussions around AI. It's actually been around for a while, but the key thing is that explainability has to do with what end users need to know in order to trust an AI application. So with that in mind, I wanted to kind of point to a couple different definitions that are out there. One is a definition that I found in the European Journal of Radiology. And this author says, explainability refers to how AI models articulate their decisions, making their processes transparent and understandable to users, particularly in fields where these decisions can significantly impact well-being and patient outcomes. So one thing I would point out about this definition is that it includes the concept of transparency, which is used a lot as sort of another term or a broader umbrella term, including explainability. But the important thing here is that end users, clinicians in particular, are learning and figuring out how much they want to trust AI solutions that are coming into their world. So the question is, what information do they need to know? And this second definition, which actually comes from regulatory guidance that was jointly issued for AI-based medical devices by the US, Canada, and the UK, In the US, it's the FDA, and in Canada and UK, it's similar agencies. And what they say is it's valuable to provide the basis of a device output or other information that explains how machine learning medical devices, MLMDs, reaches its output, the logic of the model, when this information is available and easily understood. Access to this information helps one critically assess the device and its output when patient care decisions are being made. Another good practice is to provide information on product development and risk management activities across the total product lifecycle. So that's a mouthful. Sorry to read words that are on the screen there for you. But
helpful to level set, though.
Definitions kind of define the scope of the types of information that AI solutions are being asked in compliance models, and that industry groups are also promoting as part of what should be provided to end users. John, thoughts from your end on these concepts as we get into them?
Yeah, I just think, again, it's what we've been hearing from our customer base. And again, we're fortunate to have a lot of perspective from the EHR industry that have either in the throes of developing AI initiatives around pDSI or working with and developing channels with AI app developers. And it was certainly, as you'll talk a little bit more, a fair amount of education around it at the spring trade shows and what has been occurring more recently. So I think it's important to know that this explainability concept, and you'll touch on a little bit more in more detail as we get into some of the other industry efforts. It's extremely important, I think, for AI app developers that might be new to the healthcare industry, that there is a infrastructure and some information systems around that are shaping AI app development.
Yeah, and I heard a good example of explainability that was kind of more specifically focused on what an end user needs to understand about a model. And the example that I heard was in the radiology space. Now, using AI to assist in the interpretation of radiology images is one of the bigger use cases that's out there in the market now. And from an explainability perspective, I heard a speaker talking about the fact that a radiologist has been looking manually and trying to identify certain things that help him or her interpret an image, historically, without any help from AI. So the question for this clinician, when AI comes along and sits beside them to assist in this process, is what is this AI looking at compared to what I care about when I look at a radiology image? So a radiologist might be concerned about looking at the shape of something that they see, the color, the size, and maybe even the texture that they can tell from the image. So when you think about what an AI model might be doing, and this would be a model that's possibly crunched through hundreds of thousands of images and the interpretations that have been done on those images. For the radiologist, the question is, well, did that model look at those same things? Did it just look at size and shape? Did it incorporate color? Did it incorporate texture? And so when a model is presented, understanding those data elements that are in the model is one aspect of explainability that a clinician is going to care about.
Really good point there too, Bob. And again, if we give deference to the AI app developers that might be newer to the healthcare arena, there are a lot of nuances in workflow, both clinical and administrative, as it relates to what the model might be used to predict and support, and how it's going to provide feedback to the user interface and all. So really important and great example there about there's a lot of nuances within a lot of these healthcare use cases and workflows.
Another aspect of explainability is kind of these related concepts. I mentioned transparency before, but an interpretability is another term that's commonly used. And that's being able to interpret the outputs. So that kind of goes to the comment you were making, John, is these applications, it doesn't matter what kind of health IT you're working on, the user's understanding the workflows that go into this decision process sort of are part of the picture too, not just the output of the model, but how the full application has been built. So as we get into some of these different models for explainability that are out there in the industry, we'll be touching on these additional concepts of interpretability and transparency as well. Transparency I think of it as the umbrella term that covers everything that end users might care about. But not every end user cares about all of the things that are being promoted that AI needs to be transparent about.
Yeah, really important, because again, if the clinicians or even, like I said, administrative personnel, they're relying on this decision making that ends up in a patient chart, in a report, it is something to be referred back to, and there's always the legalese that's hovering around that. So you really have to be sure, really have to believe in it. And I think, like to your point, transparency is a leading thread.
And you know, I often think about this in comparison to the drug world, because we have a comprehensive model that's already out there to provide information about drugs, both to clinicians and to patients. You know, we have drug inserts, and I think about what a clinician wants to understand when a new drug comes into their world. You know, how does the industry build trust with clinicians to convince them that they should start using a new drug? How did a drug like Ozempic and its related drugs move into the market? You know, and there is information that came to clinicians from clinical trials. It was telling them the effectiveness of the drugs. It was giving them risks and warnings about the drugs. It was telling them particular uses for the drugs and areas where the drug should not be used, instructions, patient populations that it would apply to, and such. An AI model is much the same, and the models that we're going to talk about today have been built to provide very much the same type of information. So with that introduction, let's move into what the Office of the National Coordinator, the Assistant Secretary for Technology Policy, has done in their world for the certification program for health IT. Just as a quick introduction to this topic, at the end of last year, EHRs who want to have the full EHR certification or base EHR certification under the ONC program needed to upgrade their certification to the requirements of a new criterion called B11, which was the decision support interventions criterion that replaced the prior clinical decision support or A9 criterion. One of the key additions in this new B11 criterion was the handling of AI solutions that are involved in decision support. Now, on the EHR side of the world, what this rule mainly did was require them to support the use of AI solutions in two ways. Number one, provide an API that can deliver patient data from the EHR into an AI model. Secondly, to provide an interface where this explainability information and transparency around how the AI solution works, where that information can be put in the EHR interface. So ONC called this information source attributes. And we're going to talk about some other explanations of source attributes, but the term ONC used was source attributes. And I kind of divide their source attributes into two sections. On this slide, you see actually the 9 specific categories that they have, which actually break down into 31 fields within the EHR interface that are the 31 source attributes. But the categories, I think, are helpful here. 4 of these categories really focus on explaining the predictive DSI solution to end users. Basically, who developed it? How does it work? What is the output of the AI? What's the specific values that are going to be pushed out by this technology for the clinician to see? What's its overall purpose? What are cautions and out of scope uses? And actually risks come in here too, identifying any risks from use of the AI. What populations does it apply to? Patient populations. And then other details about what those inputs are. And we talked about that in the context of the radiology example earlier. Clinicians understanding the inputs to a model is as important as them understanding the outputs, and it helps them interpret the outputs that they see from an AI model. Then in addition, there's a set of attributes that are more focused on the governance that's being applied to the model. So in the O&C world, they really focused in on 2 specific areas. What's being done to assure the continuing validity of the results that are being presented to clinicians from an AI model? Because there's an issue of data drift over time. A model may be developed with a certain data set and tested in a clinical trial with a certain data set. But then the question is, as you move that out into the real world, does it continue to produce valid results? And the second main characteristic that's looked at is whether it continues to produce fair, unbiased results. Because we know that biases can be driven across a lot of different demographics, and that needs to be continually looked at. So much of the rest of these governance attributes have to do with monitoring the continuing effectiveness of an AI solution. So that's what the O&C did. They called these things source attributes, and they required EHRs to create an interface so that any AI solution that plugs in to an EHR can both get data that the model needs to be effective and also publish this source attribute information to explain to end users the effectiveness of the AI solution.
And there's a history around this too, right, Bob? So you had mentioned CDS, clinical decision support. So
Right.
developing all of those rules over the course of history with electronic health records, and even bundled in with that, the concept, and again, for those that might be newer to the healthcare industry, the concepts around what EHRs had to do as it relates to, and continue to do so today, safety enhanced design, usability testing, and then acknowledging obviously disclosures and HIPAA governance around that. So the idea around explaining how the UI works, what the user is able to be presented with, where it came from, and the governance system supporting change control, for instance, all of that is something that it's just we're upping the ante a little bit here as it relates to AI applications. So these AI application developers need to understand really what's expected and what needs to be available for these EHR partners.
Yeah, and one key note on that, the way this particular O&C regulation stands now is that if an EHR releases a predictive decision support application as a module that or functionality that's built into its EHR, it's required to provide all of this source attribute explainability information. If an independent AI solution is purchased by a provider organization that's using this EHR, and it's plugged in to the EHR. This interface is available for use, but currently today is not directly required to be used. Now, the customer, the provider organization, can certainly require and ask for this information because they have an interface available in the EHR to be able to present it to their clinician and users because it's useful information. So it's a little bit of a nuance. It's required if the EHR releases the AI solution. It's available for use if an independent AI solution is plugged in. So now, sort of what we want to get into is, where did this come from? Where did this requirement come from that the ONC adopted? And how does it fit into the bigger compliance and industry standard picture? Now, one thing I wanted to point out, actually, a couple of weeks ago, I bought a new battery for a camera of mine because my old battery had died, and I happened to pull out the package insert. And I realized as I looked at it, I mean, frankly, I wouldn't normally look at the package insert that I got with a camera battery, but I did happen to look at this one, and you can kind of see that in the product world, this type of information isn't uncommon. Same type of information is being presented for a simple battery. Things like keep out of the reach of children, don't break the battery open, as well as intended uses and some instructions on how to use this product. So maybe these are consumer product safety requirements. I don't know. But in general, there's a level of information that end users need about products, and AI is no different, right? AI has some unique, and every product has unique and different things that end users may want and need to know in order to trust the product. And I would suggest that maybe the trust issues, at least where we sit today with AI, are greater than they would be with this battery. But nevertheless, there's a consistent approach to providing this type of information for many products.
Yeah, so don't throw away the directions when you're going to be co-developing or developing something for an EHR or a payer, right? That's a lesson.
That's right.
So what I'm going to do here, Bob, is, so we've started up in terms of explainability, understanding where it came from, its roots in what we might consider a source of truth and what ONC has done as it drives the electronic health record industry, but how that's been impacted with many other sort of third-party guidance, whether it's documentations or industry groups and even laws. So we have this next section here, Bob. We're going to dive into the concept of industry model cards for AI app developers, where there are some jurisdictions that have drawn on some of the requirements that ONC has. And those jurisdictions are both local and internationally. So I'll just hand it back to you for a high-level overview in terms of where explainability is making its way into legalese or third-party guidance.
Absolutely. So first off, I want to talk about the Coalition for Health AI, an important industry organization today that's involved specifically in the development of AI and the promotion of trust for AI. They collaborated with the ONC on the development of the ONC B11 requirements, specifically around the explainability and risk management requirements that went into the source attribute list that we just talked about. Also, keynote about CHI is that some of the major provider organizations, particularly large research organizations like Mayo and Stanford Health, Duke, Johns Hopkins, Boston Children's, are all involved in this organization. So there is a lot of input that came from that provider community on the information they need to understand and explain AI solutions to their end users and build trust so that everyone can realize the value of these solutions. There have also been many key health IT technology players involved in this organization as well, because at the end of the day, they care about end customers, the provider organizations, trusting the AI solutions that they bring to market, because no one's going to buy them if they don't trust them. So that's where Chai comes from. They have brought to market this concept of a model card. They refer to it as a nutrition label, as being like a nutrition label. And what it has in it is that source attribute information that ONC has required. And to some extent, it's gone a little bit beyond that. So it incorporates the information that's needed for compliance. And Chai continues to work on building out what this should look like and what trust is needed and what types of information are needed in this model card, which presents this explainability information to end users. And Chai's focused on the areas, we've touched on some of these already. Many of these areas, transparency, safety, security and privacy, fairness and bias, and usefulness, really are part of the big picture of what users need to understand and part of what needs to be in risk management programs. Risk management, particularly safety, security, and fairness and bias, are key aspects. But transparency that provides the right explanations to end users also obviously plays into that. Chai has published this template. It's available for use. It is aligned with the ONC requirements and can be used by independent developers. Next, what's important is that a key member of the Chai family is Duke Health. And Duke Health kind of pioneered the concept of explainability and transparency for AI solutions with a paper they published back in 2020. It was cited by the ONC when the ONC came out with their B11 rule and their source attribute requirements. And Duke has continued to be actively involved in this space. They use the term model facts. That's what they started with. And that transitioned into this concept of a model card that Chai came out with. The key thing that Duke has done is that they've actually now published their own template for model facts, and they have published a real example for a real solution that they have in the market. It's a deep sepsis model that was developed at Duke Health. So they've published a real model card. This is most of it. And I'm sorry that this is a bit of an eye chart for you now, but it's available online if you want to look at it. And they've done a great job of covering the compliance requirements for source attribute information that ONC required, and gradually continued to develop their view of what end users need to understand to effectively use and trust AI solutions.
So what I'll do here, Bob, real quick, because it's important. So now you've teed up the idea behind model cards and industry getting together to review attestations by AI app developers. Really, again, some of the main criteria that comes out of the ONC rules, for instance. And now, as we look at it here, there are jurisdictions that are drawing on and creating law as it relates to AI applications. So I know you're going to call out an example or two from the state regulations as it relates to AI. And you can see that there are a number of states that actually have laws on the books that are either directly or tangentially have to do with healthcare. Many have some that are in process and going through the legislative process. And then we'll touch on international jurisdictions as well. So you have a nice little slide here that sort of tees this up, that it's beyond certification with an EHR, beyond testing and publishing information about your AI model in a card, perhaps. There are some requirements out there in terms of deployment.
Yes, and we mentioned 3 states that have adopted some AI legislation. The one on this list that actually has adopted legislation that most directly affects healthcare is Colorado. California and Utah, their legislation is a little more consumer focused. It's going after some of the same concepts, but in terms of the most direct impact on healthcare, I want to look at what Colorado's done and then talk about some of the other activity in this space. It's a developing area. So first of all, Colorado adopted a law that applies to high-risk AI applications. And then within high risk, they use this concept of consequential decisions. They wanted to focus their regulation on AI applications that are making consequential decisions. And then they listed some areas where they believe consequential decisions are made. And healthcare services is one of those, specifically called out in the law. And then they specifically identified the types of information and activities that they wanted to see these high-risk applications showing publicly and actually conducting in terms of activities. And it's essentially the ONC source attributes. It's the model card information that industry has been behind. And it is the risk management, the ongoing risk management activities that are a significant part of the full transparency picture. So what are you doing to continue to assure that your AI model is producing valid and effective and safe results? The most interesting thing, I think, for the audience today is that one of the things they said in the Colorado law is that if you are ONC certified health IT, or you have health IT that complies with federal health IT standards, substantially equivalent to the Act's requirements, then you are exempted from specifically complying with the Act's requirements. So they recognized that the ONC had set a standard that they could specifically cite in the law. The EU AI Act is very similar. It has very similar categories in terms of the types of things it's looking for. Risk management, that ongoing risk management of these AI applications and disclosure of the activities around risk management continues to be a key focus. Same as the ONC, same as the Colorado law. And that sort of goes into data and data governance to make sure that data drift and erosion of validity and fairness isn't happening over time. And then the technical documentation section of the law largely goes into the same types of disclosures that you find in the ONC source attributes and in industry model cards. Lastly, I would also point to the US FDA, Health Canada, and UK joint guidance that I mentioned at the start of the presentation. Again, that guidance lines up with the same concepts of providing explainable, understandable information to end users about how to use the AI, what risks are involved, warnings, intended populations, etc., along with disclosure of ongoing risk management activities. So that's a lot, but it touches on sort of key stuff that's in place now. And then there's a whole cycle of legislation that we're seeing in the market. I mean, in legislatures at the state level during the first half of this year. We could also see more activity at the federal level. So to kind of tie this together, I just wanted to sort of touch on three things and statements that have come from both industry, specifically from industry, with regard to their activities and what's happening in new legislation. On the CHI front, we talked about what their model card has done. When they released their latest template, they specifically called out that it's designed as a starting point to comply with ONC requirements and do more as they continue to develop this model around what end users need in order to develop trust and adoption. The same thing with Duke Health's release of their model facts template. And when they released their sepsis model example, they were happy to see that their 2020 paper had influenced what ONC decided to adopt. And now they have released their example of model facts for a real AI application that meets the ONC requirements. And then lastly, I wanted to note what the Business Software Alliance has said, because there's currently California AI legislation pending that aligns with the Colorado law pretty closely. It's a consequential decisions law that specifically calls out healthcare as an area that needs to have transparency, explainability, and risk management applied to it. And the Business Software Alliance, which includes a lot of the big players in the AI space in technology, has come out specifically supporting these types of concepts of explainability, trust, and risk management. They believe that it's necessary to realize the full potential of AI, to create that trust, and to deploy it responsibly. They have asked that legislators focus on high-risk uses and specifically called out healthcare. And they recommend that the laws require risk management programs and impact assessments. So there's a strong industry view that the steps that the ONC has taken and that the steps that are being taken throughout industry with model card information are the right direction for AI in healthcare.
And that probably transitions into the fact that with all of this opinion and guidance and recommendations is what are some activities that AI app developers could do to assure the end users. So the end users have a critical eye towards if I have to rely on a decision that's being made through an AI application. I need to understand its background. I need to understand that it's been vetted. I need to understand that as an organization, I own a fair amount of risk in using these products. So, and I think it was really interesting, Bob, when you pulled out specifically from like the Colorado law and the Business Alliance, they talk about things that are substantially equivalent to what? So if we think about the history with Drummond, for instance, as of last year, the EHR developers, as you had said, had to come up to speed with a requirement called B11. So for predictive decision support interventions, had to attest to and demonstrate compliance with all 31 elements as it relates to source attributes, the 9 majors and their subs, and then included with that, surround that with demonstration of compliance and breadth in a risk management program. So what Drummond has done is we've been able to take those activities. We are experienced. We're the leading ONC ACB, and we're fortunate to have the major EHR customers with us going through those certification programs. So they've made their clinical decision support applications, migrated to decision support interventions, and have either designed on their own AI solutions and had to certify them to the B11 criteria, or the partnerships have begun and they're looking for third parties to be able to plug into their EHRs, probably likely through FHIR interfaces if we think about things going forward, and or I'm a provider organization. I'm going to write my own or leverage a predictive decision support model that's been developed in a lab that I own. How do I ensure and understand and take on and adjust for the requirements as it relates to risk interventions? So what Drummond Group has done here is we've taken essentially the same program that the EHR developers had to do, and we've been able to tailor it to those standalone applications and offer a program here where we will go through with you to, if you need help from the minutia around building out the source attributes. Do you need a review or help authoring risk management policies? And then going through a formal review and attestation process. And what that is this will fulfill that substantially equivalent requirement that you might see in the Colorado law or the Business Alliance is asking for, to be able to say that I can't go through B11 certification because I'm not an electronic health record system. Fine. But those electronic health record systems are going to look to an onus and a responsibility from that AI application to fulfill these requirements, to be able to have the look back and populate risk source attributes, to have the look back and the breadth of, like I said, a risk management solution. So the Drummond program, what we're doing is we're looking at those organizations that might be considered supply decision support intervention vendors. And we will look at the source attributes. So again, the 9 major and the 22 subs that go along with this. Think about this too. It's not a one and done. AI is a dynamic environment, constantly changing. As you had mentioned, Bob, there are rules and legislation today in time. There's likely going to be more. There's a number of legislative activities that are in flight now. So you want to be able to have a partner that's aware of that and help you adjust, and throughout the course of a year or certification period, bring your product up to speed, or to ensure it's up to speed. And we have capabilities here to look at the delivery side of it. What does your UI look like? What's your documentation policies? Are you up to speed with the requirements of the API interface that the EHR vendor is likely going to expect? And then obviously surrounding that with a true risk management program, which has its roots and references to, as the ONC rule does, looking at the NIST RMF as it relates to artificial intelligence. So
and
a
it's
fair amount of activity here.
It's not just a point in time thing either.
Right.
It's important. The EHRs are required, if they release AI, to publish within the EHR the source attribute, model card information, and continually attest that it is being kept complete and up to date. That's a compliance requirement, and that builds ongoing trust, because that information might be accurate on the day that you start using an AI solution, but you need to know that it continues to be accurate and fair over the long term. And I mean, that's the big issue with AI, is that how do these models evolve? How does data drift affect the validity of the outputs from AI, as these solutions expand, geographically into larger patient populations and such. And then the risk management program is really important too. I mean, that's where you do this work. That's where you continue to monitor your AI model and its effectiveness. So 2 key components. It's a subset of the full B11 rule. We pulled out and mirrored these requirements so that they could be extended to these independent AI developers. The other requirements in B11 really apply to the EHRs that are maintaining the data and need to have an API to support the use of these AI solutions. But the explainability, source attribute requirements, and the risk management program requirements, we wanted to give the independent AI community a program that aligned with ONC and would allow them to have independent validation that they're at the same level as EHRs that are releasing AI solutions.
Right. So again, it is a nice tie into the legalese. And I think this sort of sums it up, right? So what are we doing here from a Drummond perspective as it relates to an AI model? So we're looking at the compliance and our experiences, healthcare, IT industry, and legal standards. So as an AI developer that might be a supplier to an EHR of predictive decision support interventions, you are now at the same level of that EHR that had to go through certification. So the certified EHRs are looking, and it makes partnerships a lot easier if you're able to come to the table with a certification in hand. And basically, we can use the word partner ready, or you supply the predictive decision supports in what we would consider a compliant manner. So when you think about that, there are model cards that you still may want to fill out. There are attestations. This is a way to fast track all of those efforts and bring yourself in alignment with these emerging laws that call out the requirements from the ONC rule as it relates to B11. So it's a strong consideration. We're getting a lot of good feedback on it.
And a key point here, John, because we talk with a lot of EHRs, and many of them are partnering with independent AI developers. Some of them are choosing to do native development of AI applications, but many do choose to partner with AI solution developers. But the key thing is that when they make a decision to partner, the EHR is considered to be supplying predictive decision support under the B11 rule. And that's problematic because then when they make that partnering decision, they immediately have to have the source attribute model card information. All of the 31 attributes have to be complete and up to date for their partner application, and they have to have a risk management program in place. So AI developers that want to be ready to partner with the EHR community should have that information in place. When we talk to EHRs, they're like, it's problematic for us as an EHR because we don't own that application. How do we do the source attributes?
Right.
How do we define this explainability information? Well, it's difficult. So partner AI developers need to be ready with that information, and that really enables the partnership and this sort of hand-in-glove compliance between the AI solution developer and the EHR that's partnering with them. And again, that's another reason that we developed this program, is so that this subset of requirements is available and can be validated for the independent AI community and help them and help our EHR customers too, who many of whom want to partner, help everyone be ready, not just to meet the ONC standards, but also meet this broader set of industry and state and international requirements that we've talked about all at the same time.
Right. I think there's a trust factor there too, right? So our EHR developers have trusted, Drummond for a long period of time to ensure that they are in compliant with ONC and CMS rules. And your ability to leverage our experience to perform an analysis of a standalone app, this is information that's quite helpful for EHR developers to be able to say that whether it's a Fire Client API or a risk pDSI-risk AI app, my end users often look to an EHR as sort of a source of truth and a vetting agent to be able to say that, yeah, this application, this product has been put through this paces. And it's just extremely, we could have a whole other probably webinar on the legal ramifications as it relates to risk and product valuation when it goes to healthcare IT. So I think what we want to do too is this information here, Bob, if we want to jump to the next slide there, is I'll have you kick off and then I'll fill in some of the blanks here. We were able to have boots on ground experience going to the spring trade shows, and we're surprised yet not surprised by from the interviews and what we're able to do at our Drummond kiosk and go to education sessions. So maybe I'll have your perspective first, and I'll bring it home, and we might have time for a couple of questions near the end there.
Yeah, it looks like we do have a few questions coming in, so we can get to those quickly. Yeah, I mean, just a couple key observations. Number one, explainability was talked about a lot. It's a growing subject in the AI space because it's so closely related to user trust and user adoption. And then many people outside of the certified EHR world weren't aware of the ONC requirements and the interplay that they have with the entire health IT market. And then lastly, there was some confusion. I saw a number of vendors who seemed to think that the security certifications that they had sort of covered the bases. But it's really a broader issue of explainability and trust and risk management beyond just security risk management that goes into the issues that are coming up both with the ONC rules as well as these other standards and laws that we've talked about.
Right. Yeah, concur. A lot of the same. I had the privilege to attend both. Spent most of my time in the AI and interoperability pavilions. Matter of fact, we had the good fortune of demonstrating some product software from Drummond here in the HIMSS interoperability showcase. But again, same sort of themes. And it was interesting, Bob, and you and I talked about this, is the number of vendors that were there. I mean, the number of ambient listening apps, the number of workflow enhancement apps, the number of, and I think people have to remember that the predictive decision support definition, it relates to both clinical and administrative and workflow enhancements. So there is a great definition from ONC that surrounds that anything that performs some sort of organization or decision rendering can be considered predictive decision support. So, automatic registration routines, for instance, that's all part and parcel of that. But again, a lot of competition. I mean, when I literally say hundreds of AI app developers, and to your point exactly, it's you'd hear like, SOC 2. We've done high trust. We've even done a HIPAA assessment. All great things, and all should be required as these are what an EHR, if you're going to partner with it, and or the end user provider group is going to want to know. But now, especially from the product line, that's the front end user interface, the requirements to say that, source attributes and all responsibilities that the EHRs are, if they're not self-developing their own, relying on a third party, is like those need to be there. And in terms of, again, quite critical, the risk management as it relates to population, how often your algorithms are checked, any bias, all of those things that Bob alluded to earlier. So the clinical adoption challenges. I say clinical, but put administrative in there as well. It's the trust factor. There's a lot of competition. And a lot of end user organizations, provider groups, don't necessarily have the wherewithal to check every single one. So again, emerging requirements and legalese and, fight to the top, and the cream will rise to the top most likely. So we, from a Drummond perspective, Bob, you've seen this on the B11 side, and we see it now with current customers that are enrolled in and are going through the program that we have. The idea there's some additional education and some follow-up and product development work that actually has to occur going forward.
Definitely. Well, we've got a few questions out there. No further explanation needed here. Why don't we just jump into the questions?
Sure. I'll go sequentially here. I think at the top there was one that says, can we just publish this information as a web page accessible from our EHR?
Yeah, and the answer to that is yes. I mean, you can have the information at the ready. You can publish it. Actually, right now, the requirement that EHRs are under with B11 is only that they publish the information inside the product. I believe that CHI is coming out with a repository to publicly publish model card source attribute information. And obviously you saw the example from Duke where they've done that themselves for their sepsis model. So it is being published. And And then the question is whether you would want the independent validation that the EHRs are getting with ONC certification under the B11 rule. That's why we came out with the pDSI-risk certification, was to provide independent validation, not just on the source attribute model card information, but also on the compliance of a risk management program, which is a key aspect of the laws that are involved here.
Right. And so we have another minute or two, so maybe we'll just handpick a couple of it. Yeah, a question about partnering as an AI developer, partnering with certified EHRs. Again, hopefully up to this particular point, we might have addressed it going forward, but a partnership or developing a channel with leading EHR developers is, you have to remember they're doing a lot of work as the API world has opened up. So whether through taking on a predictive decision support intervention application or other FHIR clients or application software that may be independent of that, there's a lot of vetting and greenfield activity around this. So as an AI developer, your opportunity is to distinguish from what we saw definitely at the trade shows, yourself from the competition, that partnering and ensuring and being able to say to an EHR developer, I'm a good actor because of what I've done and what I can attest to is pretty important.
And just a quick note here. I mean, I've worked with lots of EHRs who want to partner with AI developers because their expertise is in developing an EHR. It's not necessarily in developing an AI model. You as an AI developer may want to partner because many of these EHRs have a broad customer base that you want to get access to. So they don't necessarily want to develop the AI application, but they do want their customers to have that functionality. So there are lots of partnering opportunities, and we're certainly seeing it in the market.
All right. I think we got time for one more, so I'm going to combine two questions there. One is that a question about, does my AI software need ONC certification for the U.S. market, and an example of a customer that might go through the certifications. If I combine those, your AI application software as a standalone may not qualify for ONC certification because it's not an EHR or perform some of the functions that an EHR would. However, there are ONC certification requirements around privacy security that you could qualify for. And the program here, as an example, there's a vendor that created AI predictive decision support interventions within its EHR. And they got some requests from other providers and all that they're going to spin that AI module off as a standalone and allow it to be integrated with other provider workflows or other EHRs. So that standalone AI app is not an EHR, but it does perform the predictive decision support interventions criteria, and it would have the risk management requirements attached to it as well as the source attributes. So hopefully that answers that type of question. And again, at the end of this, you'll see real quickly that we certainly, myself and Bob, welcome any follow-up questions to help you make a decision if the program might be right for you. So,
and I would note on that, certainly under the Colorado law, you need to meet many of the requirements for ONC certification that relate to source attributes and risk management. And by meeting those standards with the certification, you qualify for that exemption under the Colorado law. And then there are multiple other pending consequential decision laws at the state level in the U.S. And we'll see how this current legislative cycle goes, but I expect that some will pass and will mirror the Colorado approach in terms of saying healthcare AI, they are high-risk applications in many cases because they make consequential decisions that affect patient care. So from that perspective, you'll need to meet the standards that ONC has set, which are mirrored in these laws, and getting certified either to Drummond's pDSI-risk certification or to a full B11 certification is a path. It's a glide path for you to effectively meet a number of the requirements in the U.S. market. And with that, John, I think we have used up all of our 60 minutes. So if we didn't get to your questions, we certainly can follow up with people after this webinar.
Yes.
Concur. Appreciate the time and attendance.
Thank you, everyone, for taking the time out of your day. And thank you, Bob and John. If you have any other questions for Bob and John, you can email advisoryservices@drummondgroup.com. If you want to learn more about the pDSI-risk certification, you can scan that QR code on the screen. Everyone have a great day, and we'll see you at our next webinar.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.